Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining. I'm just gonna take a minute to make sure that the lighting looks okay and our audio is good. I feel like that's fine. Great. And I just want to give everyone a moment to filter in because who knows what even is time anymore. So yeah, let's just give them a minute. But I hope you're doing well. I personally just got back from a week on the road where I got to spend some time out on the Washington coast and then a little bit of other time camping, which was super lovely. And so I'm feeling really good and pumped and refreshed and ready to get back to work. And I super hope that you can find time in your own schedule to go take time for yourself and hang out with your loved ones. Okay, great. So I have a couple, let's see. So today we're going to be covering a couple topics, two pieces in particular. One is a news article detailing the Biden administration and USDA's latest anti-monopoly moves in the food and meat worlds. Or I'm sorry, it's not the anti-monopoly one. This is an old draft. This article today is actually all about the USDA using its allotted money to create more small meat processing plants in more rural areas. And I'm so excited for that. If you're a fan of farm-to-table food, if you're a fan of sustainability, of small local farmers markets, this is a huge win for everyone who works and operates and patronizes that sphere. This move isn't perfect, and we'll talk about what's a little bit problematic about it when we discuss the article, but it is in fact a huge step in the right direction. As of about 4 years ago, the news had come out that about 100 companies cause about 70% of all global emissions, the ones that cause global warming. And this is a really fantastic case where government action at the behest of collective citizen and voter action is coming together to help our local economies and small local farmers. Hi, welcome. So I'm really excited that this is what's happening. We'll have to keep tabs on the story moving forward, but just initially, I'm really stoked. Okay, and then the second piece that we're going to discuss today is an essay by the farmer, homesteader, organic farm school instructor, Rick Misterly of Quilisascut Farms. Hello, welcome. This is from Chefs on the Farm. It's this book, Chefs on the Farm. The book all about Quilisascut, which I am reading right now in preparation for the Chefs of Color workshop they're hosting at the end of the month. And I should leave this more accessible. And they have lots of different workshops throughout the year. So you can totally find one that fits your personal culinary education / agricultural education needs. Excuse me. And I'll pop a link to their website in the description below once the recording goes live. And that way you can check out what they have on offer and see if it fits in your in your journey, in your learning journey. I do know that they have a workshop coming up in August that they do have room still for more participants, and I know that they would love to see you there. Okay, and so then about Rick, I'm pretty sure he does all the necessary on-farm slaughter that that he and his farmstead require. And one of the most valuable activities during the farm school is that you help process a freshly harvested animal, either a ram or a lamb or a goat, but for sure a quadruped. And then you also do farm birds together. So it's definitely a really hands-on and intimate view of what an on-farm slaughter is. And this essay details his personal views on his seemingly duplicitous role as caretaker and slaughterman. But first, if you're here, I super appreciate you. If you wouldn't mind grabbing the subscribe button and then maybe popping a like on this video, that would super duper help out this channel, and I would greatly appreciate you for it. Okay, great. So let's look at this USDA, this article regarding the USDA. It's originally published by the Associated Press out of Iowa. And but I'm reading it from the Wisconsin State Farmer news website. Okay. And it starts out with a photo of U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack at a meat counter with one of its owners in Iowa. Okay. The federal government promised Friday to spend $500 million to encourage the construction of smaller meat processing plants, excuse me, located closer to farmers who raise chickens, pigs, and cows, with the goal of diversifying an industry now largely run by a small number of large corporations. So I guess it is a little bit of like anti-monopoly work. U.S. Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack announced the program in Council Bluffs, Iowa, in addition to another $150 million to be used for existing small processing facilities with unexpected costs. The goal is to help them recover from the coronavirus pandemic and compete better in the marketplace. Vilsack says he wants to improve profitability for livestock farmers and better serve consumers who increasingly want to know where and how farm animals are raised. So that, again, is speaking to us, people who are concerned with farm-to-table movement, sustainable farming, individual ranchers, as opposed to shopping at the grocery store, like shopping at your farmer's market. If you buy meat at the farmer's market, I encourage you to discuss with your farmer how they have to go about getting their animals harvested and processed for your consumption. Because I guarantee you, it's like, if they are not in a situation where it is kind of a hassle for them to do, it has been in the past. And so I highly encourage you to get that conversation going, because it's a thing. And then the other thing too is that I think that's really awesome that they have designated 150 million with an M to help with existing small processing facilities. So they're not going to leave existing processing facilities, the small ones at least, they're not going to leave them in the dust to just like build up brand new ones. I think that's really great. Quote, "This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to transform the food system so it is more resilient to shocks, delivers greater value to growers and workers, and offers consumers an affordable selection of healthy food produced and sourced locally and regionally by farmers and processors from diverse backgrounds." End quote. That's from Tom Vilsack, the Agriculture Secretary himself, which I just want to like take a quick moment to just as a disclaimer, I don't think that Tom Vilsack is like the most amazing person in the whole wide world by any means, and certainly he has had a spotty track record in terms of how well he does in fact support farmers from, quote, diverse backgrounds. But I will say that in recent years, at least in terms of like how long he's been with this administration, he has made moves towards being better, and also like genuinely acknowledges the reality of climate change. And that is a huge step up from the last guy we had. I actually have a couple videos earlier from a couple months ago on this channel, if you want to like do a little deep dive on my channel, about Sonny Perdue, who was our last Secretary of Agriculture and who genuinely did not believe in climate change. Okay, back to the article. Last year, the coronavirus pandemic shut down significant portions of the nation's meat processing capacity when the virus spread quickly among workers at processing plants. The production bottleneck forced some pig farmers to euthanize animals when they couldn't find facilities to process them. It prompted a discussion about the dangers of a highly consolidated meat production industry in which processing takes place in a few large-scale plants owned by a handful of the largest meat-producing corporations. And just a little context for, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. This website is kind of janky and I kind of regret using it for this. But something I did want to point out about when they say processing takes place in a few large-scale plants owned by a handful of the largest meat-producing corporations. Let's just talk about beef briefly, specifically, because I believe the statistic is that 73% of all beef production is controlled by 4 companies, at least one of which is not even based in the United States. I want to say at least 2 of those companies are based overseas. And so that is to say most of the profits from those companies are going overseas. And then that leaves 27% of the entire country's market share for every other producer you've ever heard of. And that is to say they all only get like a tiny bit of the market share as compared to 4 companies. Ranchers have also complained about a system that forces them to negotiate cattle sales with a few corporations that often don't pay them enough to make a profit, again, raising issues of intense consolidation and the need to increase competition in the packing industry. That's what they're talking about. Vilsack said that COVID-19 exposed a food system, quote, that was rigid, consolidated, and fragile. He said that President Joe Biden is determined to shift the balance of power back to the people by investing in building better and fairer markets for producers and consumers. So yes, COVID-19 did in fact expose the system, but it certainly has been this way for a very long time. And so I really appreciate that they are addressing it. And it sucks that it took a literal global pandemic for this change to happen, but we are here for that. The money, including the $500 million, comes from the American Rescue Plan, a $1.9 trillion aid package passed by Congress and signed by Biden in March. Okay, I'm not sure if this is the right place to point this out, and I had to confirm this because, again, this is in March, and so that was kind of a long time ago, relatively, I guess. But when they say that Congress passed this bill, I just need to point this out that they mean Democrats in Congress passed this bill. You can fact check me if you want, but literally 0 Republicans voted for this bill to pass. 0 Republicans. And so for me, that's a huge red flag for that party. And if you are somebody who is represented by a Republican in Congress, in our federal Congress, I think it would be worth your time to examine how your representative feels about climate change and whether or not they are voting for helping your average American human being, or if they're looking out for their own interests, because the proof is in the pudding. They all literally voted against giving us anything. So yeah, if you consider yourself to be a Republican or you are represented by a Republican in government, I highly encourage you to audit your principles, but mostly their principles, because they're the ones who are literally making decisions that affect you. Okay, back to the article. It will provide grants, loans, and technical assistance to help build new meat and poultry processing facilities. Vilsack said it is his hope to have projects in the works by early next year. What's it, July right now? And so hopefully by January to March of 2022, they'll have more processing plants out there available. It would also be really wonderful to have more USDA certified small processors available. I know that in the state of Washington, you can get your animal slaughtered by WSDA, like Washington State certified slaughterman, but there are a lot of rules that you have to follow. And so one of which is that you can't sell your meat retail at that point. It has to go straight to your end consumer, and it certainly can't go over state lines. And so, yeah, to have USDA small scale slaughtering available for small independent farmers would be a huge game changer. And everything that you buy at your farmer's market, at your local PCC, at your Whole Foods, if you're still shopping at Whole Foods, all of that stuff has to go through the USDA and not your state Department of Agriculture. Vilsack said the USDA also plans to initiate a new rule that will make it easier for farmers to sue companies they contract with over unfair, discriminatory, or deceptive practices, and will tighten the definition of what it means for meat to be labeled a, quote, product of USA, to exclude animals that have been raised in other countries but processed in the United States. Yeah, that would be awesome. I feel like we've all entered into a contract and not been able to read the entire thing, or like not completely understood the entire thing, and the consequences of entering into an agreement that you don't necessarily understand all of it. For individuals, it's like a really terrible thing, but when you're dealing with companies who are heavily incentivized to profit off of your ignorance, it's pretty dangerous. There's actually a movie, I think it's still coming. I don't think it's come out yet, but it's called Percy versus Goliath, and it stars Christopher Walken. I actually talked about this in a past live stream, but Walken plays a canola oil grain farmer who gets into a legal battle with the company Monsanto, and it outlines like all the trouble that farmers face when they are embroiled in a legal battle with a huge corporation who, again, has just like buckets of money and endless lawyers to litigate. So hopefully this will, in fact, help protect farmers against that kind of thing from these large corporations. Oh, and then the thing about product of USA, that's so weird to me that like your product can be labeled product of the USA, even if it's not like born and raised in the United States. I think that's super misleading, because when I see that something is produced in the United States, or a label that implies that it's created in the United States, I think that my purchasing money is going towards other Americans, and that's where I would want my money to go to when I spend my money on a product labeled as such. And I think it's so shady that that is not currently the case. Okay, back to the article. The North American Meat Institute, a trade group representing 95% of United States output of meat and poultry products, rejected some of the assertions made about industry consolidation. Mark Dopp, Senior Vice President and General Counsel for the organization, said in a letter to USDA officials in June that the coronavirus pandemic sickened workers at meat processors of all sizes, not just the largest. Creating small regional harvest facilities will not address this issue, he said. He added, building more processing plants will also not address the labor shortage that is one of the biggest problems facing the meatpacking industry. That's a whole bunch of straw man arguments. I think straw man is the word for what he's doing here, because like coronavirus is not the only thing that's going to be solved by the smaller meatpacking plants, but smaller meatpacking plants will present problems for his industry fellows, because it does represent competition for them. And yeah, so of course, something like the North American Meat Institute is going to lobby against anti-monopoly moves by the government because they are thriving in this unregulated environment. And so, again, for those of us who want to do farm to table, who want to support our local economies and support our local sustainable farmers, Mark Dopp of the North American Meat Institute, or NAMI, is not representing our best interest. He is representing the best interests and profits of the large companies that he represents. So yeah, I'm very wary of like any statement that they put out. He said, before the government tries to fix the current system of meat production, it must, before we move on to like the next little bit, which is like so infuriating, like I can't, the next part. He mentioned, Mark Dopp also mentioned something about the labor shortage that is one of the biggest problems facing the meatpacking industry. And I just want to know what his version of fixing the labor shortage is. I'm like very curious. So if you happen to know Mr. Dopp yourself, please let me know what he thinks about the labor shortage and how we can possibly fix it. Okay, so he said before the government tries to fix the current system of meat production, it must acknowledge that its efficiencies are responsible for reducing the share of disposable income U.S. citizens spend on food from 17% in 1960 to less than 10% today. Quote, this remarkable drop is attributable largely to systemic efficiencies that allow food processors to offer food to consumers at lower prices. Oh my God, that is a horrible argument. And I'm just going to tear it apart right now, because just because we as a whole are spending less, that doesn't mean that that's a good thing. Like the quality of the food has gone down over the last, oh my God, when was 1960? Like 60 years ago, over the last 60 years. Food scarcity, food distribution, workers' rights, animal welfare, all of these things have suffered, not to mention the carbon output from these quote unquote efficiencies that he touts to be like a service to the American people have actually cost us all a lot more than just 7% of our disposable income. So shove it up your ass, Mr. Dobb. That is not a useful argument. And finally, from the article, Vilsack also pointed out that the farmer's share of every dollar spent on food has declined consistently from 35 cents in the 1970s to around just 14 cents in recent years. And again, I'm just going to reiterate that I don't personally think that Tom Vilsack is a saint by any means. I don't think he's a perfect human being. And I think that his participation in that sort of like one-upsmanship in how shitty you can make your food, shitty and cheap that you can make your food, is not something that I'm going to endorse. Like, I think that he fell for the straw man or whatever argumentative trap that Mr. Dopp set for him by responding to it. But whatever, that's how they be. Okay, and now for a little bit more commentary from me. So regarding the possibility of having more small meat processors for small local farmers, this would solve a hugely important issue. Just anecdotally for me, and like the last little while that I've been in butchery and like talking to local farmers and local butchers, I have noticed that many people on both the ranching/farming side and on the butchery side both cite the lack of small independent processors as a huge issue in the meat world. And again, if you are a customer who wants to eat good meat, this is a hugely relevant issue to you and your plates. And again, if you do shop at a farmer's market, if you do happen to know your farmer or butcher or rancher, I highly encourage you to broach the subject with them and just ask, like, what does it take to get a live animal from their farm to being in those plastic wrapped packages in the coolers that you can purchase at your whim. Ask them what that process was. And again, if it seems streamlined at this point, I guarantee you at some point it was not, and they had to work real hard to get it there. But more likely than not, it's kind of, that's a bottleneck for every single member of both of those communities, the agricultural community and the butchering community. That's a bottleneck for everybody. They also mentioned the labor shortage, which I would also like to address a little bit further, because there are many solutions to that problem. And I was actually listening to a podcast the other day that was by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, NCBA. Yeah. It's called like Beltway Beef, and it was either the most recent episode or the second most recent episode, and they talk about how there is a recognized labor shortage in the American beef industry. But the trouble, but he didn't mention in the podcast either like what solutions that they're thinking about in terms of like fixing it. Because a lot of the solutions out there that we've already seen happening, because the labor shortage in that department is not new, FYI. It is not, I mean, yes, COVID had a huge effect on the laborers within the meat industry, but even before then, they were already working under terrible conditions and often understaffed. And so a lot of the solutions that we've seen over the last couple decades have either involved automating jobs, which is to say outsourcing jobs to robots, which, like, I don't know, that's a whole nother thing. But either way, it's not really creating jobs. Or marketing said jobs to migrant workers. And again, none of these solutions have proven to benefit any of us very much, except for lowering the price of meat, which, like, again, we pay on the back end in so many other ways that I feel like I would have just given up that 7% of my disposable income. Anyway, so I super hope that the proposed solutions to the labor shortage is money set aside from that American Rescue Bill that allows for much higher wages for processing plant workers, especially the slaughtermen, like especially for the slaughtermen. They do the hardest and likely the most important job in the entire meat supply chain, and they get easily the least respect. Like, I would entertain an argument if someone wanted to say, like, oh, that's not the most important job. Like, okay, maybe it's not like the most important job, but it's up there, like, easily, like, top 3 most important jobs in the entire meat supply chain. And but I challenge anybody to tell me somebody who is less respected than a slaughterman. If you're watching the recording, please feel free to comment down below what professions are less respected than slaughtermen in America or even worldwide. And I just, let me know, because I don't think there is one. Something I just want to point out, though, about slaughter is that to me, I feel like it's really, really important, because an improper slaughter can undo nearly anything, like anything and everything that a farmer or rancher has worked for in terms of, like, animal welfare, for, like, the quality of the meat. So an improper slaughter can undo all of that. And the slaughterman also sets up the butcher for either success or failure. Like, there are so many things that the slaughterman can or cannot do that will, like, directly affect the profitability and, like, the workmanship that a butcher can provide after that. But again, just in general, our society at large, like, does not respect them, and them, or the service they provide, or the skill it takes to do what they do when they do it well. And that's on us and, like, our death phobia. But we can talk more about that another time, I suppose. Anyway, I just want to point out that this is that the bill passing and the USDA making moves towards creating the smaller meat processing plants is a shining, hopeful example of government action, again, at the behest of collective action by the citizenry, the voters, that will benefit us and our plates and our planet. So the call to action for y'all and for me too is to examine whether or not your representative in Congress voted for this to happen. Again, if you know that your if you know that your representative in the U.S. Senate or the House of Representatives is Republican, I can tell you with absolute confidence that they did not vote for this at all. They didn't vote for anything on the American Rescue Plan. They voted to say no to it. And that is just a fine example of the Republican Party not giving a shit about you. So please stop supporting them. And I mean, for the record, I don't know how many of the Democrats in Congress give a shit about me in particular. Like Maria Cantwell maybe doesn't care about me at all. But truth be told, she voted for this bill to pass, and kudos to her on that one. Yeah. And it's especially ironic because like the people who are like super into like self-sufficiency and like living off the land or whatever, y'all are the ones who are going to get extra screwed by Republicans not doing anything about climate change. Like your land is going to change. Like the fertility of your land is going to change. And your Republican representatives are laughing their way to the bank, just so you know. Anyway, I do also want to quickly point out that this article was originally published by the Associated Press, and I'm reading it off of the Wisconsin State Farmer website. But just below this article on the Wisconsin State Farmers page, there's a link to an opinion piece that they published entitled "Billions for Farmers of Color Isn't Racist. It's Smart and Long Overdue." I highly recommend that you check that out. And if I remember, I'll pop it into the description below so you have a link to get to it. But that's regarding this other piece of the American Rescue Plan that provided debt relief for farmers of color to make up for the USDA's like very, very racist history. So yeah, I highly recommend. I also covered it in a live stream a couple weeks ago and recommended The Daily Show did a really, really good segment on it because they also included like a ton of historical context all the way back to the time of slavery, which like, if you recall, had a lot to do with agriculture. And so, yeah, it's like super relevant to what we're seeing today in terms of those lawsuits happening against the debt relief. So yeah, there's all that. Okay, so we'll get to Rick's essay in just a moment, but first let's do some Butchery 101 channel announcements. There are two fantastic ways to support Butchery 101 right now. The first one is to become a Patreon. For just $10 a month, you support Butchery 101 in a tangible and long-term way, and you get access to tons of benefits. I do a Patreon exclusive Butchery live stream every Wednesday, so tomorrow, where I break down some meat from my home kitchen. This week, we'll be working on a rabbit. 2 weeks ago, we did a duck. And sometime in the future, I might be doing some dry aged beef. We'll see. I don't want to make any promises, but that is like something that I hope will happen. Okay. And then I outline all the triumphs and tribulations of my meat journey at home for Patreons in a private Instagram account. Patreons get recipes, how-tos, and also an honest glimpse into what it takes to buy and eat local meat in your home kitchen. There are also other benefits available to Patreons, like extended tutorials, one-on-one meat consultations, and you can even partner with Butchery 101 to advertise your small business if you happen to have one. Please come join and support Butchery and Meat Education for All via the link in the description below. Which, if you're watching this live, no, there's no description, but if you're watching the recording, it's down there. Um, the other good way, the other really great way to support Butchery 101 is to donate to our GoFundMe page. We had a super successful and like really wonderful fundraiser last summer. And I'm so grateful to every single backer who dug deep and like really got us to our goal. And yeah, they're just like so wonderful. Like it was really like lovely community, and I'm so grateful for everybody. I did leave the campaign open though. So if you missed last year's fundraising session, you're always welcome to pop over and just drop a couple bucks if you have them to contribute to the GoFundMe over there. Again, also linked down below. And then just a reminder that you too can have a transformative on-farm experience at the Quilisascut Farm School of the Domestic Arts. And I'll link their website in the description below so you can check them out. But obviously we're talking a little bit more about them in the latter half of this live stream because we'll be reading an essay by the farmer himself, Rick Misterly, one of the farmers. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. And now let's get back to the show. Okay, so now we're going to do a quick reading from Chefs on the Farm, Recipes and Inspiration from the Quilisascut Farm School of the Domestic Arts. And I kind of forget to mention that, but it does include recipes. And the book itself is organized by season, which I think is so lovely to organize a book about a farmstead by season. And so they have tons of awesome recipes for the kind of products, featuring all of the ingredients that Quilisascut grows on farm. They also make cheese, they raise goats and make cheese from the goat milk. And I think that's such a great use of that kind of livestock. But yeah, I happen to be attending a workshop of theirs later in the month, which I'm super excited for. Specifically, it is the Chefs of Color workshop. And again, you can also find your own. I believe registration is closed for that one, but you can find your own time to attend a workshop there. They have tons of different types of workshops, and so I highly recommend just popping over to their website and seeing if any of them resonate with you. They have bread baking ones, and then a culinary 101 for food professionals, which is one that I took in the past, and it was just it truly is a lovely experience. But okay, this essay is entitled "Butchering: The Farmer's Perspective" by Rick Misterly, Quilisascut Farm School of the Domestic Arts. By the time a few days have passed on the farm, the chefs, students, and staff, all from different backgrounds and with different skill levels, invariably create a bond, an understanding of shared experiences that feels like family. But what brings us all together as a group? Is it the big communal table where we sit and eat together each night? Is it the closeness of the bunkhouse quarters? Is it the work that we share in the garden and the kitchen? Or is it something else? One activity that people say, more than any other, brings them closer is butchering the large animals. When we are ready to butcher a lamb or goat, trepidation is palpable. Some people want no part of it, and others are eager to see this process. I consider myself the animal's caretaker. I've watched over them and fed them all their lives, and I know the care that has gone into their raising, as well as the intermediary between the animal and the students and the chefs. So I feel a special responsibility, both as a human and a carnivore, to make butchering animals as stress-free for the animals and humans as possible. First, I assure the students that they will not see the actual death, except for the chickens and ducks, because I feel that killing is not a spectator sport. My single biggest source of stress or uncertainty is how I can keep the animal as calm as possible. Being alone with the animal and slaughtering it outdoors in the place where it was raised is the best way to accomplish it. About 10 minutes after the animal's throat is slit, and I've hung it so that it bleeds out completely, the students see the animal still intact. Then the process of skinning and eviscerating begins. That's something most of these chefs and most people in general have never experienced. I encourage people to look at the animal, help remove the skin, and see how it feels. Students are surprised how clean the inside of an animal is. Then the slaughtering is When the slaughtering is done on this level, rather than the large production line slaughtering facilities we hear about, it's not gory and bloody like something out of a horror movie. Then we cut the animal in half. The thing that stands out is how neat and organized the inside of the animal is. I guess that is why they call them organs. We remove the organs that can be eaten: the heart, the liver, the caul fat, and the testicles if the animal is male. We leave the kidneys inside the carcass until we break it down. An old butcher once told me this is the best way to do it, to protect the tenderloin and keep it full of blood. Otherwise, it dries out. Then Chef Karn goes through the process of fabrication, or breaking the animal down into its different cuts and usable sections. And the students cook the students cook with these different parts of the animal, making everything from pate to sausage to grilled tenderloin. I feel this process is incredibly important, and that it draws us together because, in a way, we are all accomplices. Witnessing this process breaks down certain barriers. Some chefs come here with an aversion to seeing the death of an animal, but they still think it is important, so they overcome their fears with the rest of the group. They have seen the entire process, from the live state of the animal to enjoying the food on the plate. It's a primal experience and goes back into our human heritage, an understanding and an experience that on some level is missing from our lives today. Understanding the cycle of life and death that connects us all. So that was Butchering, the Farmer's Perspective by Rick Misterly of Quilisascut Farm School of the Domestic Arts. I personally really love the complex perspective, and maybe it's not that complex, but the perspective that farmers and slaughtermen have, and some butchers have, on the topic of death in particular, because for them, when they work that closely with live animals, and then also like so closely with that transition from life into death, a lot of them gain like really, really deep understandings of what it is to steward an animal in its life and then into death. And they don't have the kind of fear of death that I think a lot of us do. Like, I personally did not think a lot about death before becoming a butcher, and I've learned a ton from them in a way that like I don't see a lot out in like this in society at large. It's funny, but the only other person who I've seen that kind of like realistic and mature perspective on death itself is a friend of mine by the name of Jessica, who is a breast cancer survivor. And she's somebody who has literally had to like consider her own mortality because that's what cancer has done to her. But ultimately, death is something that we all have to face. It's literally the one thing that like every single living thing has in common. And so like I really appreciate the kind of perspective that you get from farmers and slaughtermen on that front. Again, I really appreciate you guys being here. I think on that note, we'll wrap up for the day. Tomorrow, just a reminder that tomorrow for Patreons, we are going live, I think around 2 p.m. or so, to butcher a rabbit together, and we'll talk about how to cook it for the week. And then on Friday, I should have another upload available for y'all. I'm kind of toying with the idea of doing a makeup tutorial for y'all because the weather is still hot out there, and as a former line cook, I know how to do makeup that lasts through like a 95-degree 12-hour shift. So we'll see. I'm not sure. But anyway, thank you all so much for joining today, and I really appreciate you. Okay, have a good one. Bye. Oh, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit notifications if you want. All of those things super duper help out the channel, and I really appreciate you. Again, don't forget that you can support us on Patreon or GoFundMe. And then check out Quilisascut if you can. Anyway, see y'all around. Bye.